On September 15, 1978, a small funeral was held in Topanga Canyon, California, and with it, one of television's most beloved fictional families lost a member it could never truly replace. Will Geer, the actor who had played Grandpa Zebulon Walton, was gone. But his death was only one thread in a much larger, quieter story that unfolded across 9 seasons of The Waltons, a story of illness, ambition, exhaustion, and the private costs of playing a family that America had come to see as its own. This is the real story of why the actors of Walton's Mountain, one by one, walked away. When The Waltons premiered on CBS in September 1972, almost nobody in the network's programming department expected it to survive. It was slotted opposite ratings juggernauts, built around a soft-spoken narration, a rural Depression-era setting, and a cast of unknowns playing a family that prayed together, struggled together, and said goodnight to each other one by one at the end of every episode. Creator Earl Hamner Jr. based the show on his own childhood in Schuyler, Virginia, and that authenticity became the show's secret weapon. Audiences did not just watch the Walton family. They adopted them. By its second season, the show was a top 10 hit, and the actors who played John Boy, Olivia, John Sr., Grandma, Grandpa, and the 6 Walton children became, almost overnight, some of the most recognizable faces in America. But fame on The Waltons came with a peculiar weight. Unlike other hit shows of the era, this was a series that asked its actors to embody wholesomeness, humility, and old-fashioned family values, week after week, for 9 years. And for several members of that cast, the distance between the role and the person underneath it became harder and harder to sustain. The most consequential departure, the one that reshaped the entire series, belonged to Richard Thomas, the young actor who played John Boy Walton, the family's eldest son and the show's narrator, whose adult voice bookended every single episode. Thomas was the emotional center of the series. His character's ambition to become a writer mirrored, in some ways, Earl Hamner's own life, and audiences responded to him with an intensity that bordered on possessiveness. But by 1976, after 5 seasons and an Emmy win, Thomas made the decision that stunned CBS executives. He told producers he would not be returning for a 6th season as a series regular. His reasoning, which he has discussed in interviews over the decades since, was not built on scandal or conflict. It was about the trajectory of a career and a life. Thomas had married in 1975 and become a father to twins soon after, and he has spoken publicly about wanting to pursue a broader range of roles than television could offer him at that point, along with a desire to work in theater and film rather than remain locked into a single character for the whole of his 20s. Playing John Boy had made him famous, but it had also, in his own telling, threatened to define him permanently in the public imagination as a teenage farm boy from Virginia at precisely the moment he wanted to prove himself as a serious adult actor. He left the show in 1977, appearing only sporadically afterward, and the production made the unusual choice to recast the role rather than write John Boy out entirely. Actor Robert Whiteman stepped into the part for the show's 6th and 7th seasons, a decision that many longtime viewers never fully accepted, and one that underscored just how difficult it is to replace an actor who has become, in the audience's mind, inseparable from the character. Thomas's departure was, in retrospect, the first sign that the Walton family as television audiences knew it could not hold together forever. But it was not the only one, and it was not even the most painful. Ellen Corby, who played Grandma Esther Walton, suffered a massive stroke in 1976, midway through the show's run. It was a medical emergency that threatened not just her role but her ability to speak and move at all. Corby had built Grandma Walton into one of the show's most beloved characters, a woman whose sharp tongue and deep tenderness anchored the household. Her stroke left her with impaired speech and partial paralysis, and for a period, it seemed her time on the series was simply over. But Corby, by most accounts a woman of considerable will, fought to return. The show's writers made the extraordinary decision to write her real medical condition into the storyline itself, having Grandma Walton suffer a stroke on screen and slowly recover, allowing Corby to work at a reduced capacity while the character's arc mirrored her own recovery in real time. It was a rare moment of television imitating an actor's private struggles so directly, and it allowed Corby to remain part of the Walton family, in some capacity, for several more years, even as her health continued to limit what she could do on set. Then came Will Geer's death in 1978. Geer, who played Grandpa Zebulon Walton, was already 76 years old when the show began, a veteran stage and screen actor with a colorful and complicated history, including having been blacklisted during the McCarthy era for his political affiliations decades earlier, a fact that made his later life embraced by mainstream American television audiences almost poetic. Geer died of respiratory failure, and unlike Corby's illness, there was no writing around it. Grandpa Walton was killed off within the show's narrative, and the family, both fictional and real, had to continue without him. For a series built so heavily around the idea of generational continuity, of grandparents passing wisdom down to grandchildren, losing Geer struck at the emotional architecture of the entire show. While illness and death reshaped the older generation of the cast, a different kind of departure was unfolding with Michael Learned, who played Olivia Walton, the family's matriarch. Learned had come to the show as a trained stage actress with Shakespearean credentials, not a natural fit, on paper, for a gentle Depression-era farm wife, yet she made the role her own, winning 3 Emmy Awards for the part. But by the later seasons, Learned began to feel the specific fatigue that afflicts actors on long-running family dramas, the sense of having said everything the character had to say. She has spoken over the years about wanting new creative challenges after nearly a decade of playing a single, largely unchanging maternal figure, and the show's writers, aware of her restlessness, wrote Olivia Walton's departure into the storyline through a tuberculosis diagnosis that sent the character away to a sanatorium in Arizona for treatment, opening the door for Learned to step back from the series before its conclusion. She would return periodically as a guest star, but her exit marked the effective end of the Walton parents as a fixed unit, following not long after Ralph Waite, who played John Walton Sr., had already begun pursuing outside projects of his own, including his lifelong interest in ministry and social work that would eventually lead him toward ordination later in life. The pressures were not limited to the adult actors. The Walton children, played by John Walmsley, Judy Norton, Mary McDonough, Eric Scott, David W. Harper, and Cami Codler, grew up quite literally on camera, a reality that created its own unique difficulties. Mary McDonough, who played Erin Walton, has spoken candidly in the years since the show ended about the intense pressure she felt as a teenage girl navigating body image and self-worth while being watched by millions of viewers every week, describing struggles with disordered eating that she has connected directly to the scrutiny of growing up as a public figure inside a show that prized wholesome, unchanging appearances. Her account, shared in later interviews and public appearances, offers a sobering counterpoint to the show's gentle, nostalgic image. For the young actors playing the Walton children, adolescence did not happen in private. It happened in front of network executives, sponsors, and an audience that had very specific expectations of who these children were supposed to be. Judy Norton, who played Mary Ellen Walton, has similarly reflected on the strange psychological experience of aging into adulthood as a character the public still saw as a little girl, noting the difficulty many child actors face when audiences refuse to update their perception of a performer alongside the performer's own growth. This tension between the actors as evolving human beings and the characters frozen in the public imagination became one of the quiet undercurrents running beneath the show's later seasons, contributing to a broader sense among several cast members that it was time, eventually, to step outside Walton's mountain and build identities of their own. By the time The Waltons concluded its original run in 1981, the cast that had begun the series in 1972 had been transformed almost beyond recognition. Richard Thomas was gone and had been replaced. Will Geer had passed away. Ellen Corby continued in a diminished capacity shaped by her stroke. Michael Learned had stepped back. The children who had once been genuine children were now young adults with their own careers, their own marriages, and their own complicated relationships to the show that had made them famous before they were old enough to fully understand what fame meant. What makes this story remarkable is not that these actors left. Actors leave long-running shows for countless mundane reasons, from contract disputes to simple boredom. What makes it remarkable is how deeply personal, how varied, and how human each departure actually was. There was no single scandal, no dramatic on-set feud that tabloids could seize upon and repeat for decades. Instead, there was a slow, honest accumulation of real-life pressing and on fictional lives. A young man wanting to be more than the character that made him famous, an actress's body failing her in the middle of a broadcast season, a 76-year-old man's health finally giving out after a long and storied career, a mother figure aching for creative territory she hadn't yet explored, and children growing into adults under a level of scrutiny few young people are ever asked to endure. It is worth remembering, too, that the Waltons occupied a peculiar cultural position. It was never just a television show to its viewers. It was, for millions of American families watching in the 1970s, something closer to a weekly visit with people who felt like relatives. That intimacy, so carefully built by Earl Hamner's writing and the cast's performances, cut both ways. It made the show's success extraordinary, but it also meant that when an actor needed to step away for health, for ambition, for simple survival, audiences often felt that loss not as a professional casting change, but as something closer to a genuine family rupture. Few shows have asked so much emotional investment of their viewers, and few casts have paid quite so personal a price for delivering it. In the years since the series ended, most of the surviving cast members have spoken with real affection about their time on Walton's Mountain, even while being candid about its costs. Richard Thomas has returned for reunion specials and continued to reflect thoughtfully on what the role meant to his career, ultimately building the varied stage, film, and television resume he had once left the show to pursue. Michael Earned went on to earn further acclaim in other television roles, proving that her instinct to step away, however difficult, had opened the doors she'd hoped it would. Mary McDonough and Judy Norton have both become vocal, generous participants in conversations about the realities of child stardom, using their own experiences to speak honestly to new generations of young performers facing similar